Welcome to Calm Mysteries, a quiet place where forgotten history, lost kingdoms, and unsolved secrets drift softly through time. There is nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to remember. Just listen, relax, and let the past carry you gently into sleep. The library that was locked forever. You stand before the iron gates at dusk, watching as the last rays of sunlight catch the oxidized metal in shades of burnt orange and deep rust. The gates haven't opened in 47 years, not since the autumn of 1977, when old Matthias Krail turned the key for the final time and walked away without looking back. The library behind those gates holds 1,200,000 books, or so the town records claim, though no one alive today has actually counted them. The building itself is older than anyone can properly remember. Some say it was constructed in 1823. Others insist it dates back to the late 1700s. The cornerstone, barely visible through decades of ivy growth, bears a date that is worn smooth and illegible. What everyone agrees upon is that the Krail family maintained the library for 6 generations, passing the responsibility from parent to child like an heirloom pocket watch until the line simply ended. You've heard the stories since childhood, the way everyone in town has, about how the library wasn't just a repository of books, but something stranger. Something that didn't quite follow the normal rules. People would enter looking for one thing and emerge hours later with entirely different volumes, claiming they'd never seen the books they'd originally sought. The card catalogue, a massive oak cabinet with 3,412 tiny drawers, supposedly rearranged itself at night. Librarians working the evening shift would hear the soft whisper of cards sliding against wood, the gentle click of drawers closing and opening in sequence. Matthias Krail himself was the 7th and final keeper, the tall man with permanently ink-stained fingers who wore the same grey cardigan every day for 32 years. He never married, never seemed to leave the library grounds, except for the most necessary errands. Children would see him through the tall windows at all hours, shelving books by candlelight long after the electricity had been turned off for the night. He spoke rarely, and when he did, it was usually to correct someone's pronunciation of an author's name, or to suggest a book they hadn't asked for, but somehow needed. The decision to close came without warning. On October 15th, 1977, at precisely 4:30 in the afternoon, Matthias emerged from the front entrance, locked the 3 separate locks on the double doors, chained the iron gates, and walked to the town hall. There, he filed the document declaring the library permanently closed, deeding the property to the town with a single stipulation that it must never be opened again. He provided no explanation. When the mayor at the time, a man named Theodore Wickham, pressed him for reasons, Matthias simply repeated, "It must remain locked," 7 times in succession until Theodore stopped asking. Matthias died 3 weeks later, found in a small apartment above the bakery on Millstone Street. He was 68 years old. The autopsy revealed nothing unusual, just an old man's heart that had decided to stop. Among his few possessions was a leather journal filled entirely with call numbers. No titles, no authors, just the Dewey Decimal classifications written in his meticulous hand. The journal contained 9,833 entries. For years, people tried to get the library reopened. The town council debated the matter annually. Various proposals were put forward. convert it into a museum, a community center, a historical archive. Each proposal died in committee, stymied by the legal language of Matthias's deed and by something else, something harder to articulate. Those who pushed hardest for reopening would gradually lose their enthusiasm. They'd miss meetings, forget to file paperwork, move on to other concerns. It was as if the library itself was gently but firmly insisting on its own isolation. The building began to deteriorate in the way of all abandoned places. Roof tiles slipped and shattered on the front steps. Windows cracked in winter freezes. The ivy, which Matthias had always kept trimmed to a decorative accent, spread across the entire western wall, thick as a blanket. Birds nested in the eaves. A family of raccoons took up residence in what had been the children's reading room, visible sometimes through a broken pane on the second floor, but the books inside, at least the ones visible through the ground floor windows, seemed oddly untouched. No mold bloomed on their spines, no water stains spread across their pages, despite the clear evidence of roof leaks. The few people brave enough to peer through the grimy glass reported seeing volumes that looked as crisp and fresh as the day they'd been shelved. The card catalogue still stood in the center of the main room, its drawers slightly open in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. You first became curious about the library when you were 9 years old, during a school project about local history. Your teacher, Mrs. Pemberton, who had been teaching 4th grade for 26 years, mentioned it almost as an afterthought while discussing the town's founding. And of course, there's the old Crail Library, she'd said, but that's been closed since before most of you were born. Something in her tone, a mixture of reverence and unease, caught your attention. That night you'd asked your grandmother about it. She was 82 then, sharp as a tack despite her years, and she remembered the library well from her youth. I went there every Saturday for 12 years, she told you, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of tea. From the time I was 7 until I was 19 and left for college. It wasn't like the modern library over on Pine Street, all computers and bright lights. The Crail Library was quiet in a different way, a serious quiet, like the books were listening. She described the reading room on the second floor, circular with tall windows facing south. 24 leather chairs arranged around the perimeter, each with its own brass reading lamp. The lamps had green glass shades that cast a soft underwater light across the pages. Matthias's grandfather was the librarian then, she continued. Sebastian Crail. He knew where every book was without consulting any catalogue. You could ask him for something obscure, a book of French poetry from 1867, or a botanical guide to Asian mushrooms, and he'd walk directly to it as if he could hear it calling to him. Your grandmother paused, staring into her tea. The library had a smell, she said finally. Not the usual library smell of old paper and dust. It smelled like rain about to fall, like the air before a thunderstorm. And sometimes, when you were deep in a book, really lost in the reading, you'd hear music, very faint, like someone playing a piano in a distant room. But there was no piano in the library. Matthias's father, who was the librarian when I was a teenager, said it was just the building settling, old wood expanding and contracting. But it sounded like music. Chopin, I always thought. Nocturnes. The stories accumulated as you grew older. In high school, your English teacher, Mr. Voss, mentioned that he'd written his doctoral dissertation using materials from the Crail Library in the 1960s. They had a collection of 19th century periodicals that shouldn't have existed, he said during a discussion of research methods. Magazines from towns that had burned down in 1873, newspapers from villages that had been abandoned during the Dust Bowl. When I asked Matthias how the library had acquired them, he just smiled and said they'd been donated. By whom, I never found out. A woman who worked at the post office told you about the library cards. They were made of actual cardstock, thick and cream-coloured, she explained, with your name handwritten in fountain pen by whichever Crail was librarian at the time. The cards never wore out, never got dirty or dog-eared no matter how many years you used them. I still have mine somewhere in a box in my attic. I haven't been able to throw it away. The town's oldest resident, a man named Arthur Penn, who claimed to be 97 years old, though the town records suggested 94, remembered when the library was first established, or at least when the current building was constructed. There was something there before, he rasped when you visited him at the nursing home during a community service project. A house, I think, or maybe a church. It burned 1891, 1892, long time ago. The first Crail, that would be Jeremiah, he bought the land and built the library within a year. Folks thought it was strange, building a library when the town barely had 200 people, but Jeremiah said the books needed a home. The books needed a home? You'd asked. Not that the town needed a library? Arthur had nodded slowly. That's what he said. The books needed a home. He already had them, see? Brought them with him from somewhere east. 37 wagon loads of books. I remember my grandfather talking about it. 37 wagons coming down the main road, one after another, all loaded with crates of books. Where does a man get that many books? And why bring them to a little nothing town in the middle of nowhere? These stories, collected like pressed flowers over years of curiosity, led you here tonight. The town council is meeting tomorrow to discuss the library's fate once again. A developer from the city has made an offer to purchase the property, tear down the building, and construct condominiums. The offer is substantial, $750,000, which would solve the town's budget problems for the next several years. The council is expected to vote yes, but something about that feels wrong to you. The library has been locked for 47 years, guarding its silence like a secret. Tomorrow it might be reduced to rubble and dust, its million-plus books carted away to recycling centres or landfills. Whatever mystery it holds will be lost forever. You've decided that before that happens, you need to see inside, not to take anything, not to disturb anything, just to see, to understand why Matthias Crail locked it away, to know what it is that the building has been protecting, or perhaps what it's been protecting the town from. The iron gates are locked with a chain that looks newer than the gates themselves, probably added by the town to supplement whatever lock Matthias used. The chain is thick, industrial grade, secured with a padlock the size of your fist. Beyond the gates, a brick path leads through what was once a formal garden. Boxwoods have grown wild and leggy. Rose bushes, unpruned for decades, sprawl across flower beds in thorny tangles. A stone fountain in the centre of the garden still holds water from recent rains, and you can hear the gentle plink of drops falling from the fountain's upper tier. The library building rises 3 stories tall, built from grey stone that seems to absorb rather than reflect the fading light. The architecture is difficult to categorize. Not quite Victorian, not quite colonial, something in between or something else entirely. The roof is slate, steeply pitched, with 5 chimneys spaced along its length. The windows are tall and narrow, 23 of them across the front facade, each one dark behind accumulated grime and eternal curtains that have faded to the colour of old bone. Above the main entrance, carved into a limestone lintel, are words in Latin, Hic locus est ubi mors gaudae succurrere vitae. Your high school Latin is rusty, but you remember enough to translate roughly. This is the place where death delights to help the living. It's a strange motto for a library, though you recall reading somewhere that the same phrase is sometimes found in medical schools and anatomy theatres, a reminder that knowledge often comes from studying what is ended, what is past, what is gone. You walk along the iron fence, looking for any gap or weakness. The fence is 8 feet tall, topped with decorative spikes shaped like spear points. It runs the entire perimeter of the property, which occupies a full city block. At the rear of the building, you find a section where the fence leans slightly inward, the ground beneath it eroded by years of runoff from a broken gutter. You could probably squeeze through, though you'd have to lie flat and wriggle beneath the bottom rail. The decision feels momentous despite being relatively simple. You're not normally someone who trespasses or breaks rules, but tomorrow morning, the vote happens. Tomorrow afternoon, possibly, the demolition crews arrive. This is the last night the library exists in its current state, suspended in time like an insect in amber. You lie down on the damp ground and begin to slide under the fence. The space is narrower than it looked, and halfway through you're stuck, the iron rail pressing against your back, the earth cold and muddy against your chest. For a moment, panic flares. What if you can't move either direction? What if you're found here in the morning, trapped and foolish, but you exhale completely, making yourself as flat as possible and manage to pull yourself through to the other side. You stand and brush off mud and wet leaves. You're inside the property now, separated from the library by about 50 yards of overgrown garden. The air smells different here, you notice? Your grandmother was right about the pre-rain quality, that electric anticipation, even though the sky is clear and stars are beginning to appear. There's something else, too, underneath that. Paper and leather, and wood polish, and dust, and time. The concentrated essence of old books, but stronger than any library you've ever visited. You make your way along the path toward the building's rear entrance. The garden is wilder than it appeared from outside the fence. Plants you can't identify have seeded themselves among the original plantings. There's a tree you don't recognize, its bark smooth and silvery, its leaves a deep burgundy even though autumn hasn't arrived yet. Under its branches you find a stone bench with an inscription worn almost completely away. You can make out only a few letters. Ember what you... The rest is gone, smoothed by weather and time. The back entrance is smaller than the grand front doors, but it's protected by the same 3-lock system. You've come prepared with tools purchased at the hardware store, a tension wrench and pick set that the teenager behind the counter sold you without question, probably assuming you'd locked yourself out of your house. You've practiced on the locks at home for 3 nights, watching YouTube videos and drilling yourself until your fingers understood the feedback of pins catching and releasing. The first lock is easier than you expected, clicking open after only 2 minutes of careful work. The second is more stubborn. The pins are worn, sticking in their chambers, refusing to align cleanly. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the cool evening air. Somewhere in the garden, an owl hoots 3 times. Finally, after 12 agonizing minutes, the second lock surrenders. The third lock is different from the others. Older, more complex. It's a type you don't recognize, with a keyhole that seems too large and a mechanism you can't quite visualize from the external evidence. You work at it for 20 minutes, 30, 45, until your fingers are cramping and your confidence is fading. Perhaps this is where your attempted intrusion ends, defeated by 19th century metalwork and a locksmith's long dead ingenuity. You sit on the back step, defeated, staring at the unyielding lock. Tomorrow, the demolition. Tomorrow, the end. You've come so close to seeing inside, to understanding. The frustration is physical, a tightness in your chest. That's when you notice the window. It's a small one, just to the left of the door. Probably once provided light to a back hallway or utility room. The glass is broken, not recently, but long ago. A single stone, smooth and round like it came from the garden path, lies on the ground below the window frame. The hole in the glass is roughly circular, about the size of your fist, and the sharp edges have been worn smooth by decades of weather. You could reach through, careful of the remaining glass, and unlatch the window from inside. You hesitate. Breaking a lock feels different from entering through a window someone else broke long ago. But the logic is thin, and you know it. You've already trespassed, already defeated 2 of 3 locks. This is simply another small step down the same path. The window latch is stiff, but yields to persistent pressure. The window itself hasn't been opened in years, maybe decades. You have to work it back and forth, bit by bit, until the frame finally scrapes upward. The opening is small, barely large enough for you to squeeze through. You go head first, your hands finding a wooden counter on the other side, lowering yourself carefully into the darkness of the library's interior. The smell hits you immediately, overwhelming in its intensity. Every library you've ever visited condensed and concentrated into an almost liquid presence. But there's more. Candle wax and wood smoke, and something sweet like vanilla or old pipe tobacco. And underneath it all, that rain smell, that electric anticipation. You pull out your phone and activate the flashlight. The small room you've entered is indeed a utility space. Metal shelves hold cleaning supplies that look like they date from the 1970s. Bottles of ammonia with faded labels, tins of furniture polish, bundles of dust cloths tied with string. A mop stands in the corner, its head dried and brittle. Everything is covered with a fine layer of dust, but the dust itself seems too thin for 47 years of accumulation. A door leads deeper into the building. You push it open slowly, and it swings on hinges that don't squeak despite their age. The hallway beyond runs the length of the building, doors opening off it at regular intervals. The walls are panelled in dark wood, probably walnut or mahogany. Brass sconces are mounted every 10 feet, and though they hold no bulbs, they're polished to a warm shine that catches and reflects your phone's light. You choose a door at random and enter what must be one of the reading rooms. Tables occupy the center of the space, each one made from thick wood with elaborately carved legs. Chairs surround them, upholstered in leather that should be cracked and disintegrating, but instead looks supple and well maintained. Bookshelves line 3 walls, floor to ceiling, every shelf completely full. You approach the nearest shelf and tilt your head to read the spines. The books are arranged by some system you can't immediately discern. Not alphabetical, not by subject in any obvious way. A volume of Greek philosophy sits next to a 1923 field guide to North American birds, which is shelved beside a collection of Polish poetry from 1897. You pull out the poetry book carefully. It opens easily, the binding flexible, the pages cream-colored and clean. The text is in Polish, which you can't read, but the publication information is clear enough. Published in Warsaw, 130 copies printed. How many of those 130 copies still exist? This might be the only one. It should be in a special collection somewhere, a university library, a national archive. Instead, it's here, in a small town's locked library, shelved next to a bird guide and Greek philosophy. You return the poetry book exactly where you found it and move to another section. Here the books seem to be predominantly scientific. Treatises on botany, zoology, chemistry, astronomy. You find a first edition of Darwin's On the Origin of Species from 1859, just sitting on a shelf like any other book. Next to it is a handwritten journal, leather-bound, with no author or title on the spine. You open it carefully. The handwriting is precise, dated entries from 1913 describing experiments with plant hybridization. The author's name, written on the inside cover, Gregor Mendel. No, that's impossible. Gregor Mendel died in 1884. But here is his handwriting, or someone's handwriting claiming to be his, describing experiments performed 29 years after his death. You close the journal and return it to the shelf, your hands shaking slightly. This is what Matthias locked away. Not just books, but impossibilities, collections that shouldn't exist, volumes that were destroyed or lost, manuscripts that were never written, or that were written by dead men decades after their deaths. You move through the ground floor room by room, finding more impossible things. A copy of a play by Shakespeare that doesn't match any known work, titled The Rival Queens. A technical manual for a flying machine designed in 1492 by someone named Leonardo. A complete set of medical texts from the Library of Alexandria, which burned in 48 BC or in 270 AD or in 391 AD, depending on which historian you believe. These books claim to be from the 3rd century BC, and you have no reason to doubt them except that it's utterly impossible. The card catalogue stands in the central hall, even more massive than you imagined. 3,412 drawers, arranged in a complex pattern that makes your eyes hurt if you try to discern the logic. Each drawer is labelled in that same precise handwriting you've seen throughout the library, but the labels don't seem to follow alphabetical order. One drawer is marked distances, another reflections, a third 7 times removed. You pull open the drawer labelled distances. Inside are cards, just as there should be in a card catalogue, but the information on them is strange. Instead of authors and titles and call numbers, each card contains a single sentence. The distance between intention and action. The distance light travels in a human heartbeat. The distance between who you are and who you were. The distance from here to the nearest mirror world. You close that drawer and open another. Warnings. The cards inside are more conventional but unsettling. Do not read backwards. Not for children under the age of 7 years. requires 3 readers simultaneously, will fade if exposed to sunlight. This book remembers you. You're so absorbed in the catalogue that you don't notice at first that something in the library has changed. It's a sound, barely perceptible, a soft rustling, like papers being turned. You kill your phone's light and stand perfectly still in the darkness. The sound continues. It's coming from the 2nd floor, directly above you. Footsteps? No, not quite. More like pages being turned, one after another, in a steady rhythm. You wait, counting your heartbeats. 237 beats pass before the sound stops. Silence returns, complete and profound. You reactivate your phone's light and take a deep breath. It's an old building, you tell yourself. Old buildings make noises. Wood expanding, foundations settling, mice or rats or other small creatures moving through the walls. There's no one here. The library has been locked for 47 years. But you need to check. You need to see the 2nd floor. The staircase is at the front of the building, a wide affair with a banister polished smooth by thousands of hands over hundreds of years. Each step is marble, worn in the center where countless feet have climbed and descended. Your footsteps echo softly, a whisper of sound in the vast quiet. The 2nd floor is organized differently from the first. Instead of separate rooms, it's one large open space with the bookshelves arranged to create corridors and alcoves. The ceiling is higher here, perhaps 15 feet, with exposed wooden beams that arch overhead like the ribs of some great creature. The reading room your grandmother described occupies the southern portion of the floor. The circular space, the 24 leather chairs, the brass reading lamps with their green glass shades. You walk the perimeter of the space, your light playing across the shelves. Here the books seem older on average. Leather bindings predominate, many with metal clasps or straps to hold them closed. Some have no titles at all, just symbols or marks stamped into the leather. You try opening one at random and find it locked, its metal clasp refusing to budge despite having no visible keyhole. In the center of the reading room stands a table different from all the others. It's circular, made from wood so dark it's almost black, and its surface is covered with a map. Not a modern map, and not painted or drawn on the table itself. The map seems to be inlaid, crafted from different woods of varying colors. You lean closer, trying to understand the geography it represents. The coastlines are wrong, or not wrong exactly, but unfamiliar. Continents in shapes you don't recognize. Oceans in positions that don't match any globe you've ever seen. But wait, there's something familiar in the upper left portion of the map. That curve of land, those peninsular extensions. It looks like Europe, but rotated and stretched. Its relationships to surrounding land masses completely different. And is that Africa? Beneath it, but tilted at an impossible angle. You're so focused on the map that you almost miss the book sitting at the table's exact center. It's small, bound in red leather, with no title or author on the cover. You pick it up carefully. It's warm to the touch, which makes no sense in this cold building. You open it to a random page. The text is in English, modern English, and it appears to be a diary or journal. The entry you've opened to is dated tomorrow. Tomorrow's date, tomorrow's year. Impossible, obviously. Yet there it is, written in clear black ink. October 26th. The library opened today for the first time in 47 years. A single visitor came in through the back window. They spent 3 hours exploring the ground and second floors before finding this journal. They read this entry and did not believe it was real. They continued to the 3rd floor, where they found what they were looking for and also what they were not looking for. They left before dawn. They never spoke of what they saw to anyone. 3 years later, they returned. But that's another entry, another date, another impossibility. Your hands are shaking so badly that you almost drop the book. This is a trick, a prank, some kind of elaborate setup. But who would prank an empty library? Who would anticipate your visit? You flip back through the pages. Each entry is dated, going backwards through time. Today's date. The library remains closed. A visitor pressed their face against the southern window on the 2nd floor and looked into the circular reading room. They saw nothing unusual. They turned away disappointed. 3 weeks ago, the town council debated the library's future. The developer increased their offer to $750,000. The debate lasted 2 hours and 18 minutes. Nothing was resolved. 64 years ago, Jeremiah Crail's wagon train arrived in town. 37 wagons, each loaded with books that should not exist. He began construction on the library immediately. The books whispered in their crates all through the first night, keeping the horses nervous and awake. You flip forward in the journal, past tomorrow's entry. The pages for future dates are blank, but they're not empty. Each page seems to shimmer slightly, as if text is waiting just beneath the surface, ready to appear when its date arrives. You turn to 1 year from now. Still blank, but the shimmer is there, a promise or a threat. The sound of turning pages comes again from somewhere above you, the 3rd floor. You close the red journal and return it carefully to the exact center of the map table. Whatever is happening in this library, whatever impossible things exist within these walls, you've gone too far to turn back now. You need to see the 3rd floor. You need to understand. The staircase to the 3rd floor is narrower than the main stairs, tucked into what seems almost like a hidden corner of the 2nd floor space. The steps here are wood rather than marble, and they creak softly under your weight, despite the care you take. At the top, a single door blocks the way, painted a deep burgundy color that's almost black in your phone's light. The door has no lock, just a simple brass handle. You turn it, and the door swings inward on hinges that, like all the others in this strange building, make no sound at all. The 3rd floor is a single room, a vast cathedral-like space that shouldn't possibly fit inside the building you saw from outside. The ceiling is at least 30 feet high, maybe 40, peaked like a church roof and covered with painted stars. Not a random scattering, but actual constellations, recognizable and accurate. Bookshelves line the walls, rising the full height of the room, with a system of ladders and narrow walkways providing access to the upper levels. But it's what occupies the center of the room that steals your breath. A structure intricate and impossible, built entirely from books. Not a simple stack or tower, but an architecture of volumes arranged in patterns that seem to defy gravity and logic. Books balanced on their corners, supporting other books in cantilevers that shouldn't work. Volumes arranged in spirals that ascend into empty air. Arches and domes and flying buttresses, all made from books, all holding together in defiance of physics. You walk slowly around the structure, trying to understand its design. It's not random. There's an intention here, a purpose. The books are arranged by some organizing principle, but it's nothing you recognize. Not by size or color or age. You lean closer to one section and begin reading the titles. A history of things that never happened. The grammar of silence. Recipes for meals eaten in dreams. Maps to places that don't exist yet. The collected regrets of people not yet born. Every book is impossible, not just rare or unusual, but impossible. Books that couldn't exist, shouldn't exist, that violate the basic rules of reality. And they're all here, all gathered in this locked library, all arranged in this impossible structure. You reach out to touch one of the books, a slim volume bound in blue cloth with silver lettering. The sound of snow falling on empty roads. Your finger barely brushes the spine when the entire structure shudders, not collapsing, but responding, like a living thing acknowledging contact. A sound echoes through the vast room, not pages turning this time, but something else, something like breathing. You pull your hand back quickly. The structure settles, the sound fading. Your heart is hammering against your ribs. This is wrong. Not wrong in the sense of illegal or immoral, but wrong in the sense of being in a place you don't belong, touching things that were meant to remain untouched. It won't hurt you, a voice says from behind you. You spin around so quickly you almost fall. An old woman stands at the top of the stairs, leaning on a cane carved from dark wood. She's tiny, barely 5 feet tall, wearing a cardigan that might have been blue once, but has faded to the color of fog. Her hair is white and pulled back in a bun, and her eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses are sharp and clear. "Who are you?" you manage to ask, though your voice comes out as barely more than a whisper. "My name is Eleanor Crail," she says, moving slowly into the room. "I'm the librarian. Or I was, or I will be. Time gets confusing in here." Matthias Crail's daughter, but he never married. He never had children. Not daughter. Great niece, if we're being precise about it. Precision doesn't matter much with family. The library passes to whoever needs to keep it next. She moves past you, approaching the impossible structure with the ease of long familiarity. You're worried about the vote tomorrow, the demolition. It's not a question, but you answer anyway. They're going to tear it down, build condominiums. They voted last week. You stop. Wait, the vote hasn't happened yet. It's tomorrow morning. Eleanor smiles, a brief flash of expression that makes her look decades younger. "Time," she repeats, "gets confusing in here. The vote happened. The vote will happen. The vote is happening right now in 17 different possible futures. In 14 of them, the library is demolished. In 3, it remains locked. In none of them does it reopen in the normal sense." "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. How could you? You've been in the library for..." She glances at a pocket watch pulled from her cardigan. 1 hour and 42 minutes. I've been here for 63 years, give or take a few years, depending on how you count. Matthias was here for 91 years, though he only lived 68 of them. She taps her cane against the floor 3 times, and lights begin to glow throughout the vast room. Not electric lights, but something else, sourceless and soft, illuminating the space without creating shadows. In the new light, you can see the third floor even more clearly. The painted stars on the ceiling are moving, slowly rotating through their celestial patterns. The impossible book structure in the center of the room is even larger than you thought, its architecture even more complex. Why did Matthias lock the library, you ask? Why did he seal it away? Eleanor settles into a chair that wasn't there a moment ago, a wingback upholstered in burgundy velvet. Because it was a time, she says simply. The library has cycles, you see, periods of opening and periods of closing, just like flowers or eyes or fists. It opened in 1793 when Jeremiah Crail built this building, though the library itself is much older than that. It remained open for 184 years. Then it needed to close, to rest, to digest what it had accumulated. But what is it? I mean, I can see it's a library, but these books, you gesture helplessly at the structure. They can't exist. Half of them are about things that haven't happened yet, or things that never happened at all. The library, Eleanor says, is not a collection of books about the world. It's a collection of books that are the world. Every possible version of every possible text that has been written is being written, will be written, could be written, should be written, or was written in places and times that don't exist in the same way we do. Every book that was burned before being finished, every manuscript lost at sea, every diary destroyed by embarrassed heirs, every letter never sent, every story told once and never remembered. They all exist here in physical form. You sink down onto the floor, your legs suddenly unreliable. That's impossible. There would be infinite books. Not infinite. The library is large, but it's not infinite. There are limits, boundaries. Not every possible book exists here, only the ones that matter. Matter to whom? Eleanor's smile returns, sad this time. Excellent question. I've been here 63 years, and I'm still not entirely certain. Matter to the world, perhaps. Matter to the continuity of stories. Matter to the preservation of human thought and imagination. The library collects what matters, and sometimes what matters are things that never happened but should have, or things that did happen but no one remembers. You think about the red journal downstairs? The entry dated for tomorrow describing your visit. The library knows the future. Some futures. Possible futures. The library exists partially outside of linear time. Not completely. It's still anchored to this building, this town, this world. But it extends into other times, other possibilities. That's why Matthias had to lock it in 1977. The library was accumulating too many futures, too many divergent possibilities. It was becoming unstable, showing patrons books from timelines that would never happen, or that had already not happened, if you can parse that paradox. So he locked it to stabilize it. He locked it to let it sleep, to let it sort through all the accumulated possibilities and condense them back down to the ones that mattered. It's been sleeping for 47 years. Tomorrow it wakes up. Tomorrow, your mind races back to the vote the developers offer. But tomorrow they're voting to demolish it. In some timelines, Eleanor agrees. In others, the vote is postponed. In one, the building catches fire tonight, and the decision is rendered moot. In another, the developer withdraws his offer. The The library contains all these possibilities, all these futures, until the moment of decision collapses them into one. And which future will actually happen? Eleanor stands, leaning heavily on her cane. That depends on you, to some extent. You're here, which means you matter to this moment. The library let you in. And yes, it did let you in. Don't think those locks opened through skill alone. It showed you things. It wants you to understand. The question is, what will you do with that understanding? She moves toward the impossible structure, running her hand along the spine of a book. There are rules about the library that Matthias established, and his father before him, and grandfather before him, all the way back to Jeremiah. The library must never be opened casually. It must never be used for personal gain. It must never be allowed to interfere directly with the timeline it occupies. These are good rules, wise rules, but there's one more rule that Matthias discovered. The library must never be destroyed, not burned, not demolished, not erased from existence. If it is destroyed, all the books it contains, all the possibilities, all the might-have-beens, all the never-weres, they collapse into nothingness. Not just the physical books, but the ideas they represent, the potential they embody. What happens to the world if that occurs? We don't know. Matthias found a book about it once, a history written in a timeline where the library was destroyed in 1841. According to that history, which we can only read because the timeline doesn't match our own, the world became narrower, fewer possibilities, fewer options. Imagination diminished. New ideas came more slowly. Art became repetitive. Science stagnated. It was subtle, gradual, but inexorable. Within 200 years, that world had ossified into routine and repetition. You stand up, brushing dust from your clothes. So, I have to stop the demolition. I have to convince the town council to preserve the library. You could try, Eleanor says, but they won't listen. They need the money, and the library has been locked for 47 years. Why should they care about a building they can't use? Why should they value books they can't read? Then what am I supposed to do? Why did the library let me in if I can't change anything? Eleanor walks to one of the tall windows and pulls back the curtain. Through the glass, you can see the town below, its scattered lights twinkling in the darkness. The library doesn't need you to save it from demolition, she says. It needs you to witness, to remember, to carry forward the knowledge that this place existed and what it contained. In the timeline where the vote goes the wrong way, where the building is demolished, the physical library will be destroyed. But if you remember, truly remember, deeply remember, then the library continues in another form, in memory, in story, in the idea of itself. That's not enough. An idea isn't the same as the real thing, isn't it? Eleanor turns from the window. Every book in this library started as an idea. Every story ever told, every fact ever recorded, every truth ever discovered. All of them were ideas before they were ink on paper. The physical books are important, yes, but the library's true power has always been as an idea. The idea that all stories matter, all possibilities have value, all timelines deserve to be remembered. She moves back to the chair and sits down again, looking suddenly tired. I've been the librarian here for 63 years, as I said, but I won't be the librarian much longer. The library is waking up, and when it does, it will need someone new, someone who understands both the importance of preservation and the necessity of change. someone who can hold both the past and the future in mind simultaneously. You want me to be the librarian. I don't want anything. The library chooses. But yes, I believe it's choosing you. Why else would it have opened for you tonight? Why else would it have shown you the impossible books, the future's journal, this room? You think about your life, your job, your plans. I can't just drop everything and move into a locked library that might be demolished tomorrow. You don't move into the library, Eleanor says with a soft laugh. The library isn't a residence. You simply carry it with you. Matthias lived in a small apartment on Millstone Street. I have a cottage on the edge of town. We come here when needed, when the library calls. The rest of the time we live normal lives, or as normal as possible when you're responsible for all the possible books of all the possible worlds. But if the building is demolished, the building might survive. As I said, there are multiple futures. Or the building might not survive, but the library itself will endure in some form. Libraries are resilient. They've survived fires and floods and wars and revolutions. This one has survived for much longer than this particular building, and it will continue to survive regardless of what the town council decides tomorrow. She closes her eyes, her hands folded over the head of her cane. You should explore more before you leave. See the rest of the 3rd floor. There are sections I haven't shown you yet. Rooms beyond this one. The library is larger on the inside than the outside, as you've probably noticed. Much larger. How much larger? I've been exploring for 63 years and haven't seen all of it. Matthias spent 91 years here and claimed he'd barely scratched the surface. The library grows, you see. It adds rooms as needed, expands to accommodate new acquisitions. Last week, or last year, or next month, time confuses me now, a new wing appeared devoted entirely to books written in colours instead of words. I spent 3 days trying to read a history of the Impressionist movement that was painted in evolving shades of blue and purple. Never did quite finish it. Eleanor seems to be fading, becoming translucent in the soft light. You blink and rub your eyes, but the effect persists. Are you all right? I'm fine, or I'm not fine. I'm transitioning, I suppose you'd say, between states. The library is waking and I'm part of what it's waking from. Soon I'll be something different. A memory, perhaps, or a book on one of these shelves. My 63 years compressed into text and bound in leather. It's not a bad fate, really. I'll be preserved, remembered, always available to whoever needs to read about an old woman who kept an impossible library during its long sleep. I don't understand any of this, you admit. Of course not. Understanding comes later, if it comes at all. For now, just explore. See, remember, that's all the library asks of you tonight. She fades completely, leaving only the chair behind as evidence she was ever there. You stand alone in the vast 3rd floor room, surrounded by impossible books arranged in impossible architecture, under a ceiling of moving stars. You decide to follow Eleanor's advice and explore further. At the far end of the room, beyond the book structure, you find a corridor you hadn't noticed before. The walls here are lined with books too large to fit on normal shelves, folios and oversized atlases, and enormous illuminated manuscripts that would require 2 people to lift. Their spines are decorated with gold leaf and precious stones, or at least what look like precious stones. They might be glass, or they might be actual emeralds and sapphires. In this place, either seems equally possible. The corridor branches, and you choose the left path arbitrarily. This leads to a circular room with a domed ceiling painted to look like the sky at dawn. Or perhaps it is the sky at dawn, somehow captured and preserved on plaster and wood. Bookshelves spiral around the walls in a pattern that makes you dizzy to follow. The books here are slim volumes, poetry and aphorisms and collected thoughts. You pull one out at random. The unspoken words of Abraham Lincoln, the title page declares. Below that, compiled from silences and pauses, 1842 to 1865. You flip through the pages. Each entry is dated and describes a moment when Lincoln said nothing, when he held his tongue, when he chose silence over speech. The book catalogues what he didn't say, the words he swallowed, the truths he kept private. How is such a book possible? How could anyone know what wasn't said? But you're asking the wrong question. In this library, possibility itself operates by different rules. You return the Lincoln book and continue exploring. Room after room, corridor after corridor, each space devoted to some category of impossible text. A library within the library devoted entirely to books written in extinct languages that no one ever learned to read. A chamber filled with nothing but different versions of the same book. Hundreds of copies of Moby Dick, each one slightly different, each from a timeline where Melville made different choices, wrote different sentences, kept different chapters. In one small alcove, you find a collection of cookbooks from the future, recipes using ingredients that don't exist yet. Synthesize proteins and how to serve them, reads one title. The Art of Lunar Mushroom Cultivation, reads another. You open a book called Meals for the End of the World and find recipes intended for the Last Supper of humanity, whenever and however that might occur. The author's note explains that these are meals designed to comfort and celebrate simultaneously, to honor both memory and acceptance. You close the book carefully and move on, overwhelmed by the implications. If the library contains books from the future, that means the future is somehow set, determined. But Eleanor spoke of multiple possible futures, timelines that diverge and collapse. How can both be true? Unless the library contains books from all possible futures, every variant timeline, which means somewhere in this vast collection is a cookbook from a future where humanity thrives, and another from a future where humanity ends, and dozens or hundreds or thousands from futures in between, all equally real, all equally preserved, until the moment of choice makes one future actual and the others merely potential. Your phone, you realize, has died. The screen is black, unresponsive to touch or button presses. You have no idea how long you've been exploring. Hours, certainly. It might be close to dawn. You should leave. You should get home before you're missed. But you're not ready to go yet. You need to see more, understand more. You find stairs, not the ones you climbed earlier, but a different set, narrower and steeper, spiraling upward in a tight helix. Up and up you climb, passing floors you hadn't known existed. A fourth floor devoted entirely to maps. Thousands of them, showing places both real and imaginary. A fifth floor that's barely more than a crawl space, packed with books the size of your thumb. A sixth floor that's cavernous, empty except for a single book on a pedestal in the center of the room. You approach the pedestal carefully. The book is enormous, easily 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide, bound in leather that's been tooled with intricate patterns. No title adorns the cover. You try to open it, but it's too heavy. The cover won't budge. "That one's not for reading," a voice says. You turn. A man stands in the doorway. Young, perhaps 30, wearing clothes that look like they belong to the 1940s. Wool trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a narrow tie loosened at the collar. His hair is dark and slightly mussed, and he's holding a book under one arm. "Who are you?" you ask, though you're already guessing the answer. "Matthias Crale," he says, or a version of him, the him that existed in 1947, to be precise. The library preserves moments as well as books, you see. I'm a memory made temporarily solid, called up by your presence here tonight. But you died in 1977? That version of me did, yes, but I've existed in many moments, and the library keeps them all. I've been 30 years old hundreds of times over the decades. I've been 42, 57, 68. Right now, tonight, because you're here and you need to understand, I'm 30 and it's 1947, and I've only been the librarian for 6 years. I'm still learning how this all works. He sets down the book he's carrying, a ledger of some kind, and approaches the giant volume on the pedestal. "This book," he says, running his hand along its spine, "contains every word that's ever been spoken in this building, every conversation between patron and librarian, every whisper between readers sharing a table, every word I've spoken aloud while shelving books, all of it recorded and preserved. Why? The question escapes before you can stop it. Because words matter, because conversations matter, because every interaction, no matter how small, shapes the library and shapes the people who visit it. Someday, centuries from now, someone will be able to open this book and read the exact words spoken between us right now. They'll see this moment, understand what it meant, learn from it." He walks to the window. There's always a window in these rooms, you've noticed, and looks out at the night. "The library will be locked soon," he says. 30 years from now, the me that exists in 1977 will walk out of here and never return, physically. But I'll still be here in all my other moments. Still 30, still 42, still every age I've ever been while serving as librarian. All of us preserved, all our knowledge and experience available to whoever comes next. Eleanor said the library is choosing me to be the next librarian. Is it? Matthias turns from the window, his expression curious. Or are you choosing it? The relationship goes both ways, you know. The library needs a librarian, yes, but the librarian also needs the library, needs purpose, needs connection to something larger than themselves, needs to be part of preserving what matters. He moves toward the doorway, becoming slightly transparent as he walks. You should go soon. Dawn is coming, and you shouldn't be found here. The vote happens in a few hours. Whatever will happen, but remember what you've seen tonight. Remember that all possibilities exist until choice makes them real. Remember that stories matter, that books matter, that preserving memory and potential is holy work. Wait, you call after him. What do I do? How do I become the librarian if the building is demolished? But he's gone, faded back into whatever realm of preserved moments he emerged from. You're alone again in the vast room with a giant, unreadable book. You make your way back down the spiral stairs, retracing your path through the collections, the future cookbooks, the different Moby Dicks, the unspoken words of Lincoln, Back to the third floor room with the impossible structure and the moving stars. The chair Eleanor sat in is still there, empty now, waiting for whoever sits there next. Down the main stairs to the second floor, the reading room with its 24 leather chairs and green-shaded lamps, the map table with its impossible geography and the red journal at its centre. You pause, considering taking the journal with you. Evidence, proof that this night was real, but you leave it where it is. Some things are meant to stay in their place. Down to the first floor, the reference room, the periodical room, the thousands upon thousands of books on their shelves, the card catalogue with its strange labels and stranger contents. You run your hand along the smooth wood of the catalogue cabinets, committing the texture to memory. Back to the utility room where you entered. The window is still open, the broken glass catching the first grey light of approaching dawn. You climb out carefully, drop to the ground outside, close the window behind you. The world beyond the library grounds seems less real somehow, less solid than the impossible collections you've just left behind. You make your way back to the fence, squeeze under the gap you came through, emerge muddy and exhausted onto the street. The sky is lightening in the east. You check your watch. It's 5:47 in the morning. You've been inside the library for 7 hours and 32 minutes. You walk home slowly, your mind churning. What do you do with what you've seen? How do you convince anyone that the library must be saved without sounding insane? You can't tell people about books from the future, or impossibly preserved moments or structures built from volumes that defy gravity. They'll think you've lost your mind. By the time you reach your apartment, the sun is fully risen. You shower, washing away the mud and the smell of old books and possibilities. You dress in clean clothes. You make coffee and toast, and sit at your kitchen table, staring at the wall and thinking. The vote is at 10 o'clock this morning. You could go to the meeting, could stand up during the public comment period, could try to argue for the library's preservation, but what would you say? That it contains impossible books? That it exists partially outside of time? That destroying it would narrow the world's possibilities? They'd dismiss you as a crank, a nostalgic eccentric trying to stand in the way of progress and revenue. Or you could say nothing. Let the vote proceed. Let the demolition happen or not happen, according to whatever timeline collapses into reality. Trust that the library will survive in some form, as Eleanor suggested, as an idea, as a memory, as a potential waiting to be reborn somewhere else, sometime else. You drink your coffee and decide. You'll go to the meeting. You'll speak during public comment, but you won't talk about impossible books or frozen moments or futures preserved in red journals. You'll talk about what the library meant to the community, about the people who used it, about the value of preserving places that hold memory and history. You'll make the case for renovation rather than demolition, for reopening rather than destroying. It might not work, probably won't work, but you'll try because that's what the library showed you, that trying matters, that effort matters, that even if this timeline doesn't preserve the building, some other timeline might, and all timelines are equally real until choice makes one actual. The town hall is crowded when you arrive at 9:45. Apparently, word has spread about the vote. People fill the seats and line the walls. A mix of long-time residents and newer arrivals, business owners and preservationists, developers and historians. The air buzzes with conversation, Speculation, argument. The council members file in at precisely 10 o'clock. 7 of them, elected representatives of the town's interests, wearing these slightly uncomfortable expressions of people about to make an unpopular decision regardless of which way they vote. The mayor, a woman named Catherine Torres, who's held the position for 11 years, calls the meeting to order. The developer's representative speaks first, making his case. The building is structurally unsound, he argues. It would cost millions to renovate, money the town doesn't have. The condominiums would bring jobs, residents, tax revenue. The library has been closed for 47 years. It's served its purpose. Time to move on. Then the preservationists speak. A woman who teaches architecture at the State University points out the building's unique design, its historical significance. A man who runs the local historical society reads letters from people whose lives were changed by the library before it closed. An elderly couple speaks about their first date there, in the reading room on the second floor, 63 years ago. When public comment opens, you stand. Your hands are shaking, but your voice is steady as you walk to the microphone. "My name is Chance," you say. "I'm not a long-time resident, not a historian or architect, but last night I went to the library." You pause, and the room goes quiet. "I went inside, through a broken window in the back. I know I was trespassing, and I apologize for that, but I needed to see it before it might be gone forever." You describe what you saw, carefully editing out the impossible parts. You talk about the books on the shelves, thousands of them, rare and valuable volumes that should be in university collections or museums. You describe the architecture, the reading room, the card catalogue. You talk about the care that generations of librarians put into maintaining the collection, the love evident in every detail. The building might need work, you acknowledge. The roof leaks, the windows are broken, but the bones are solid. The collection is intact. Instead of demolition, what if we explored renovation? What if we reopened the library not as condominiums, but as what it was meant to be? A place for books, for reading, for preserving knowledge and possibility. You sit down. There's scattered applause, some nods of approval, some skeptical expressions. The council members confer among themselves. Papers are shuffled. Numbers are consulted. Finally, Mayor Torres speaks. "We appreciate everyone's input today. This is not an easy decision. The developer's offer is substantial, and our budget needs are real. However, the testimony about the collection inside is concerning. If there are indeed valuable books that should be preserved, we have a responsibility to investigate that before making irreversible decisions." She looks at her fellow council members. "I propose we table the vote for 30 days. In that time, we'll have a professional appraiser examine the library's contents and provide an assessment of their value and condition. We'll also get estimates for renovation costs. Then we can make a more informed decision." The vote on the delay is unanimous, 7-0. 30 days. You leave the meeting feeling like you've won something small but significant. Not salvation, not yet, just time, just possibility, just a chance for another timeline to emerge and become real. That afternoon, you return to the library grounds. You don't go inside this time, just stand at the iron gates looking up at the building. In the daylight, it looks smaller somehow, less imposing, just an old structure that needs care and attention. But you know what it holds inside. You remember. A voice speaks from behind you. You did well. You turn. Eleanor stands there, looking exactly as she did last night. Not transparent anymore, fully solid and present. She's smiling. The building gets its 30 days, you say. That's all I could manage. 30 days is enough. The appraisers will find books worth millions, tens of millions. The renovation estimates will be lower than expected. By the time the month is over, public opinion will have shifted. The library will be saved. She speaks with certainty, as if she's already seen this future solidify. And then what? It gets reopened? People can use it again? Eventually, not right away. It needs time to fully wake up, to stabilize. But yes, within a year or two, it will open. Under new management. She looks at you significantly. Someone young enough to give it decades of service. Someone who understands both the impossible and the practical. I don't know how to be a librarian. I don't have the training. You have what matters. You understand that all stories are real. All possibilities matter. All timelines deserve preservation. The technical skills you can learn. The library will teach you, just as it taught me, and Matthias, and all the others, back to Jeremiah. She hands you something, a library card, cream-colored and thick, with your name written on it in precise fountain pen handwriting. Welcome, she says, to the impossible work of keeping possibilities alive. Over the following weeks, the assessment unfolds as Eleanor predicted. The appraisers find treasures, first editions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, rare manuscripts, collections of letters between famous authors, scientific journals that should be in archives. The estimated value of the collection exceeds $8 million, far more than the developers offer. Renovation estimates come in lower than expected, thanks to the building's solid construction and the discovery that much of the interior is in better condition than anyone thought. Public opinion shifts. Newspaper articles celebrate the hidden treasure in the town's locked library. Academic institutions express interest in partnering to preserve and provide access to the collection. The developer, reading the room, quietly withdraws his offer. When the town council votes again, this time the decision is 7-0 in favor of preservation and renovation. You begin your training with Eleanor. She teaches you the catalogue system, which is nothing like the Dewey Decimal System used by modern libraries. The books organize themselves, she explains. Your job is to understand what they're trying to tell you, to facilitate connections between readers and the texts they need even if they don't know they need them. She shows you how to walk the third-floor corridors without getting lost in the expanding maze of impossible collections. She introduces you to the book structure that breathes, teaches you how to listen to its rhythms. She explains the rules about interference and preservation, about neutrality and care. Mostly, she teaches you to pay attention, to notice when new books appear on the shelves, additions to the collection from timelines that are just now becoming possible, to observe when old books fade or change, their contents shifting to reflect collapsed futures, to understand that the library is alive in its own way, a kind of living archive that grows and adapts and responds to the world it preserves. 6 months after the vote, Eleanor calls you to the library for what she says will be her final lesson. You find her in the third-floor room, sitting in the burgundy chair, looking frailer than you've ever seen her. "It's time," she says simply. "I've stayed longer than I should have, watching over the transition. But the library doesn't need me anymore. It has you." I'm not ready. There's still so much I don't know. You'll never be ready. No one ever is. Jeremiah wasn't ready when he built this place. Matthias wasn't ready when he locked it. I wasn't ready when I became librarian 63 years ago. But ready or not, the work continues. She stands, and for a moment she looks stronger, younger, more vivid than reality should allow. The library is about to reopen to the public for the first time in 48 years. You'll be the librarian. You'll help people find the books they need. Not the books they ask for, but the books they need. You'll maintain the impossible collections alongside the possible ones. You'll serve as custodian of all the timelines, all the stories, all the possibilities. Eleanor walks to the book structure and places her hand on one of the volumes. There's a book here, somewhere in the middle sections, called The Librarians Who Kept the Possible Alive. It contains brief biographies of everyone who's ever served this library, from Jeremiah to me, to you, to whoever comes after you. Your entry isn't written yet, but it will be. The library will write it as you live it, recording what you do, who you help, what you preserve. She turns back to you, and she's fading now, becoming transparent the way she did on your first night in the library. Remember the rules. Remember the purpose. Remember that all stories matter, even the impossible ones, especially the impossible ones. And then she's gone, leaving you alone in the vast room with its moving stars and impossible architecture and endless shelves of books that shouldn't exist. The library reopens 3 months later. The official ceremony involves the mayor cutting a ribbon, photographers taking pictures, reporters asking questions. You answer carefully, describing the collection in terms they can understand, avoiding any mention of futures preserved in red journals or books made from the silences of dead presidents. The first patron is a young girl, maybe 7 years old, holding her mother's hand. She looks up at the tall shelves with wide eyes. "Do you have any books about dragons?" she asks. You smile and lead her to a shelf in the children's section. You pull down a book, not the one about dragons in European mythology, or the illustrated guide to dragon species in fantasy literature, but a different one. A slim volume with a blue cover that seems to glow slightly in your hands. The Dragon Who Remembered the Future, the title says. "I've never heard of this one," the mother says, looking at the book curiously. "It's very rare," you reply, which is true. It's the only copy in any timeline, and it only exists because this girl right now needs to read it. The library has called it into being for her, pulling it from possibility into reality. The girl opens the book and begins to read, and you see the wonder light up her face as she discovers the impossible story inside. This is the work, you realize. This moment, repeated over and over with different readers and different impossible books, connecting people to the stories they need, the stories that will change them or comfort them or help them understand something they couldn't grasp before. You walk back to the circulation desk where the card catalogue stands in its place of honour. 3,412 drawers, waiting to be opened and explored. Somewhere in those drawers is a card with your name on it, describing a book you'll find someday, a book that will explain everything or nothing, or something in between. The library settles around you, creaking and breathing and living in its strange way. On the 3rd floor, the impossible structure shifts slightly, accommodating new volumes that have just arrived from timelines that are just now becoming actual. In the basement, which you haven't yet explored. Books are sleeping in climate-controlled darkness, waiting for their moment to be needed. You are the librarian now, keeper of possibilities, guardian of stories, custodian of all the books that were and are and might be. The work will never be finished. The library will continue to grow, to expand, to accumulate impossible texts from impossible places. But for now, in this moment, you stand in the front hall of the library that was locked forever and is now opened again. And you welcome the patrons who've come to find the books they don't yet know they need. The afternoon light slants through the tall windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. Somewhere on the second floor, a clock chimes 3 times. On the third floor, the book structure breathes in rhythm with your own heart. You're home.